Liam was a simple man. He had spent most of his life working the soil of his small farm, with his wife, Sarah, by his side. Their farm was humble, nestled at the edge of the village, far from the busy streets of the town. Life had always been simple, peaceful, and quiet, but their son Tom had changed things. 3 years ago, Tom left the village. He had big dreams of finding a better life in the city, and though Liam and Sarah were proud of their son, they worried about him. The city was far away, and they had heard stories of how hard life could be there. But Tom was strong and determined, and they were sure he would do well. Still, the silence from Tom was painful. No letters, no visits. They had heard nothing. It was a warm afternoon, and Liam was working the fields as usual. He was used to the rhythmic motion of plowing the soil, the sound of the birds, and the rustling of the trees. But today, something felt different. As he bent down to work the land, he saw a familiar figure approaching in the distance. It was Mr. Lark, the village postman. His bag of letters bounced as he walked, and his face was covered with a friendly grin. "Liam, I've got something for you today," Mr. Lark said, handing over an envelope with a blue stamp. "A letter from your son." Liam's heart skipped a beat. He stood up straight and took the letter. The envelope was thick, and there was no mistaking the handwriting. It was Tom's handwriting. A wave of joy rushed over him, and he called for Sarah. "Sarah! Sarah! Come quick!" Liam shouted, his voice thick with excitement. Sarah quickly came out of the small cottage, wiping her hands on her apron. When she saw the letter in Liam's hands, her face lit up, but she immediately stepped forward with a nervous expression. "Is it really from him?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Liam nodded and handed her the letter. He couldn't read, so Sarah had always been the one to read for him. Together, they opened it carefully, and Sarah began to read aloud. Letter from Tom. Dear Father and Mother, I hope you both are well. I am doing great in the city. I have a job in a big company, and although the work is hard, I am happy here. I am sending you $200, which I hope will help with the farm. I miss you both. Your son, Tom. As Sarah finished reading the letter, both Liam and Sarah sat down, the weight of the news sinking in. They were overjoyed to hear that Tom was well and happy, but there was also a feeling of confusion. Tom had sent money, but neither of them had any idea how to collect it. "What should we do with the money?" Sarah asked, holding the letter close to her chest. "How can we get it?" "I don't know, but we'll figure it out," Liam said, his mind racing. "Mr. Green knows about these things. Let's go and ask him. He knows how to handle things in the town." They both stood up, filled with a sense of purpose. they had to make their way to the town and figure out how to get the money from Tom. It wouldn't be easy, but it was something they had to do. Mr. Green, the village shopkeeper, was an older man who had lived in the village for as long as anyone could remember. He was kind and knowledgeable about all the little details that made life run smoothly in the small community. He was always ready to help. Liam and Sarah walked to Mr. Green's shop, which was located near the village square. The shop was small but well kept, with shelves stocked full of goods. Mr. Green was behind the counter, sorting through some supplies. "Mr. Green!" Liam called out. "We need your help." Mr. Green looked up and smiled warmly at the couple. "Ah, Liam and Sarah, what's on your mind today?" Liam explained the situation, telling Mr. Green about the letter from Tom and the money that was waiting for them in the town. Mr. Green listened attentively, nodding as he understood the problem. "You'll need to go to the post office in the town to collect the money," Mr. Green said, after a moment's thought. "But there's a little catch. You'll need something called an identity card to collect the funds. It's the rule now. Without it, they won't give you the money." "An identity card?" Sarah repeated, looking puzzled. "What's that?" "It's a card that proves who you are," Mr. Green explained. "You'll need to visit the government office in the town to get one. Don't worry, I'll go with you." With Mr. Green's help, they made plans to travel to the town the next day. The journey would be long, and they weren't sure what to expect, but at least they had a plan. The next day, the sun was still low in the sky as Liam and Sarah packed some bread and cheese for the journey. The road to the town was a dusty one, and the heat of the sun already made the air thick and heavy. The walk was long, and by the time they reached the bus stop, they were already tired. The bus ride was cramped, with people coming and going at every stop. Liam and Sarah sat in silence, their minds occupied with thoughts of the journey ahead. They didn't know what to expect, but they were determined to make it to the town and get the money for the farm. When they finally arrived in the town, they made their way to the post office, their hearts full of hope. It was a large building with stone walls and long lines of people waiting for their turn. The post office official looked up as they entered. "How can I help you?" he asked in a stern voice. "We're here to collect some money sent by our son," Liam said, holding up the letter. "His name is Tom. He sent us $200. The official looked at the letter and then at Liam and Sarah. "I'm sorry, but you'll need an identity card to collect the money," he said coldly. "Without it, I cannot help you." Liam stood there, stunned. An identity card? What was that? How are they supposed to get one? "I don't understand," Sarah said, her voice growing more anxious. "We're his parents. How can we get the money?" The official only shook his head. "Go to the government office. You'll need an ID. No ID, no money." The next morning, Liam and Sarah set out early. The cool morning air made the walk a little easier as they left their small village behind. They both carried simple bags with food and a few coins for the journey, but their minds were occupied with the task ahead. Today, they would go to the town, visit the post office, and get the money that Tom had sent. They felt a mixture of hope and anxiety, unsure of what to expect. Liam had always been a man of simple needs. The village had everything they needed, and he had never once left the farm for anything other than selling his crops or buying supplies. Sarah, too, had lived a quiet life. Her days were spent caring for the home and the farm, helping Liam with the fields, and making sure everything was in order. They walked along the dirt road, passing the familiar fields and houses of the village. It felt like a different world outside of the village, and both Liam and Sarah couldn't help but feel a little lost. After hours of walking, they reached the main road and waited for the bus. The bus was small, crowded, and smelled faintly of oil and dust. It was already half full when it arrived, and the few remaining seats were not comfortable. Still, Liam and Sarah squeezed into their seats, their bodies stiff with the discomfort of the journey. The bus ride felt long, with people talking and shouting at each stop, but it was the only way to get to the town. As the bus rumbled along, Sarah stared out the window. She saw fields of crops, houses, and small farms stretching out in every direction, all part of the land she had known her entire life. Now she was heading into the city, a place that felt so far from the peaceful life she had always known. "Do you think Tom is doing well?" she asked, her voice quiet. "I hope so," Liam replied. "He always worked hard. I'm sure he's fine." Though Sarah was reassured by her husband's words, she couldn't stop worrying. She hoped Tom wasn't struggling too much in the big city. He had always been so brave, but the city was a tough place for a young man like him, especially someone from a small village like theirs. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the bus arrived at the town. The buildings were tall and packed tightly together, unlike the wide open spaces of their village. There were so many people, and the noise from the traffic and the chatter of strangers filled the air. Liam and Sarah stepped off the bus, their hearts racing from the newness of everything around them. "Let's head straight to the post office," Liam said, trying to sound calm, even though he felt nervous. The post office was in a large stone building at the center of the town. It looked like a place of importance, with a few people standing outside, waiting for their turn. Inside, The building was bustling with activity. People stood in long lines, talking and laughing, while others rushed in and out. The air was thick with the sound of voices, and Liam and Sarah were overwhelmed by it all. "Excuse me," Liam said, walking up to a man at the counter. "We're here to collect money sent by our son." The man behind the counter looked at them with a blank expression, then glanced at the letter in Liam's hand. "You'll need an identity card to collect the money," the man said, his voice flat. "Without it, I can't help you." Liam blinked. "Identity card? What is that? We've never had one." The man didn't explain further, only repeating that they needed an identity card to get the money. Liam and Sarah felt lost, not understanding what was happening. "We were told to come here and collect money," Sarah said, her voice rising in frustration. "It's from our son, Tom. You can see the letter." The post office man was unmoved. "Go to the government office. They'll help you with the card," he said curtly. "Thank you," Liam muttered, his voice trailing off. They left the post office, feeling both defeated and confused. Liam and Sarah stepped outside, still reeling from the unexpected news. An identity card? They had never heard of such a thing. Back in their village, things were simple. There was no need for documents like that. Everything was based on trust. But here in the town, things were different. "Where do we go now?" Sarah asked, looking at Liam with a worried expression. Liam scratched his head. "Mr. Green said, we need to go to the government office. He'll know where to go." With no other option, they made their way to the government office, which wasn't far from the post office. The building was large and gray, with cold stone walls and heavy wooden doors. Inside, the air was cool, and the lighting was dim, making the place feel even more intimidating. They were greeted by a woman behind a desk, who looked up when they approached. "How can I help you?" she asked in a businesslike tone. "We need an identity card to collect money from the post office," Liam explained, holding out the letter Tom had sent. The woman looked at them for a moment, then pointed to a small room at the back. "You need to fill out a form and bring 2 photographs with you." Sarah and Liam exchanged confused glances. "Photographs?" Sarah asked. The woman nodded. "Yes, photographs. It's the rule now. You can go to the photographer's shop across the street. He'll take care of it." Liam nodded, though he was still unsure about the whole process. He thanked the woman and led Sarah out of the government office, their minds still spinning from all the new information. The photographer's shop was a small place tucked between two larger buildings. The sign above the door read, Mr. Cooper, Photographer. Liam and Sarah walked inside, where the musty smell of old paper and chemicals filled the air. Behind the counter stood a frail-looking man with graying hair and glasses. He looked up from a stack of papers as they entered. "We need 2 photographs," Liam said, "for an identity card." The photographer nodded. "I can do that," he said in a raspy voice. "Sit over there, and I'll take your pictures." Liam and Sarah sat on a small bench near the back of the shop, waiting as Mr. Cooper prepared the camera. It wasn't long before the shutter clicked and the photographs were taken. "You'll have them ready in a day or 2, Mr. Cooper said. "Come back then." Liam and Sarah left the shop and made their way back to their village, feeling exhausted from the long day. They knew they had done everything they could, but now they had to wait for the photographs to be ready before they could go back to the post office. That night, as they sat by the fire, Liam and Sarah talked about the journey they had just begun. There were still so many unknowns, but they were determined to get Tom's money and make their way back home. Liam and Sarah had returned to the village, but they couldn't forget about their mission. They had to wait for the photographs to be ready, and it felt like time was moving far too slowly. The days were long, filled with the usual work on the farm, but their minds were on the journey to the town. The next morning, Sarah woke up early to start the day's chores. There was always something to do on the farm: feeding the animals, fixing fences, or tending to the garden. Liam, too, spent most of his time working the fields. But there was a weight on both of their minds. They knew they needed to go back to the town, but they had to wait for the photographs to be ready first. The day passed slowly, and as the evening drew near, they sat together in their little cottage. The warmth of the fire comforted them, but it didn't take away the unease they both felt about their situation. "We'll go back to the town tomorrow, won't we?" Sarah asked quietly, her voice tinged with worry. Liam nodded. "Yes, tomorrow. I just hope the photographs will be ready." The next day, they made the journey back to the town. The bus ride was just as uncomfortable as the first, but they had grown used to it by now. By the time they arrived in the town, the sun was high in the sky. They hurried to the photographer's shop, eager to collect the photographs. Mr. Cooper was behind the counter when they arrived. He looked up as they entered, a tired smile on his face. "Ah, you've come for the photos," he said, as if he had been expecting them. He reached under the counter and pulled out 2 small envelopes. Liam and Sarah thanked him, taking the photographs in hand. It felt like a small victory, but they knew the real challenge was still ahead. Now, they had to return to the government office, fill out the form, and get the identity card before they could go to the post office again. The path was long, but they were determined to finish what they had started. Now, from this point, the story will be continued in the next part.